Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Katie came up with the idea for the DNA test. She didn't want to believe the stories or consider the possibility that Bill, the guy she'd fought for through years of grief and betrayal, may be hiding something else. But suspicions gnawed at her, and when she discovered an old photograph in Luna's apartment, a faded image of a young lady who resembled Bill's late sister, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She confronted Luna, her voice quivering with rage and despair, demanding answers. When confronted, Luna admitted she did not know her father's identity. Her mother died when she was young, leaving only foggy memories and a solitary photograph. Katie, her heart racing, insisted on the test. Bill had consented, but his reluctance was evident, and he avoided looking at her as he signed the consent form. Now the findings were in and the truth was apparent. Luna was Bill's daughter, the result of a brief, reckless romance that occurred years before he and Katie reconciled. The revelation hit like a tidal wave, destroying the fragile trust they had formed. Katie's hands trembled as she glanced at the paper, her mind racing with questions she wasn't sure she wanted to ask. Bill, how could you have withheld this from her? Did he know all along? And Luna, how could she have worked alongside them, laughed with them while keeping this secret? Bill broke the silence with a low, strained voice. Katie, I swear I didn't know. His words hung in the air, heavy with desperation, but they did little to alleviate her chest pain. She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the love that had survived so many storms, but the treachery hurt too deep. She saw Luna, the young woman who had inadvertently put a wedge between them, as a victim of Bill's past sins rather than a rival. Luna's eyes were filled with tears, and her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. I didn't want this, Luna explained, her hands tightening together. I did not come here to ruin anything. I simply wanted to know who I was. Her voice trembled and she looked at Bill, looking for acceptance, forgiveness, and a connection she had never felt. I didn't realize you were my father. I felt something when I met you. Like I belonged. Will, who had remained quiet until now, let out a bitter laugh. Belonged. He spat, his voice full of disdain. You come out of nowhere, flip our life upside down, and you believe you belong? His remarks were cutting, but underneath them was real grief. The type that comes from witnessing your family disintegrate before your eyes. Will had always been the glue that held Bill and Katie together, the reason they struggled to make their relationship work. He felt like an outsider in his own house, and his place in his father's heart was uncertain. Will, that's enough, Bill remarked, his voice firm but weary. He walked toward his son, reaching out, but Will backed away, his eyes flaming with rage. No, father. You do not get to tell me what is enough. Not after this. He pointed to Luna, the DNA results, and the anarchy that had erupted in their previously steady world. You have been lying to us. To Mom. To me. And now you expect me to simply accept her? He pointed to Luna, who flinched as if struck. Katie stood, her voice soft but steady. Will, it's not Luna's fault. She didn't ask for this any more than we did. She stared at Bill, her gaze searching his features for the man she thought she knew. But you should have told me. Even if you didn't know for certain, you should have told me as soon as you suspected. Bill ran his hand through his hair, his wrath bubbling over. Katie, I hadn't suspected anything. I didn't know anything about her mother. It was one night years ago when you and I... He paused, recognizing that his comments were just making matters worse. The reality was like a sharp edge, piercing deeper with each attempt to explain. Luna slumped into the couch, head in her hands. I'm sorry, she said, her voice muffled. I should have stayed away. I should never have gone to Los Angeles. The weight of her words hung over the room, a reminder of the decisions that had brought them here. She had come to the city with the intention of making a reputation for herself, unaware that her sheer presence would disrupt the lives of others around her. Katie's heart hurt for Luna, the girl who grew up without a father and without explanations. But the anguish of Bill's betrayal was a barrier she couldn't overcome. She reflected on the years they had spent mending their relationship, the evenings they had stayed up talking about their hopes for Will, and their future plans. Had everything been a lie? Had Bill been keeping this secret, even if only in the back of his mind all this time? I need time, Katie finally stated, her voice barely audible. She stood, straightening her skirt with trembling hands, and moved towards the door. Bill called after her, but she did not turn around. When she stepped outside, the rain was cold and relentless, soaking through her clothes as she strolled aimlessly down the road. She had no idea where she was heading. All she knew was that she needed to get away from the smothering truth. Inside, Bill looked at Luna, his expression a mix of shame and determination. "You're not alone anymore," he added, his tone softening. "You're my daughter, and I'll be there for you." But even as he spoke, he could feel the hollowness in his words. He had lost Katie's trust, possibly permanently, and Will's rage was a wound that would never heal. Luna nodded, but her eyes were far away, as if she didn't quite believe him. Will watched the conversation, his heart full of contradictory emotions. He wanted to detest Luna and blame her for the mayhem, yet he saw the same agony in her eyes as he felt. She was his sister whether he liked it or not, and that truth was a chain that connected them. He turned and exited the room, his footsteps ringing in the solitude. Days stretched into weeks, and the Spencer family became fragmented, with each member dealing with the aftermath in their own manner. Katie checked into a hotel, reluctant to confront Bill or the memories that haunted their house. She immersed herself in her task, her grin a brittle mask that fooled no one. Bill tried to contact her, leaving voicemails that she never returned, his desperation mounting with each missed call. He spent his evenings with Luna, attempting to rebuild a relationship from the ashes of his past, but each encounter with her reminded him of what he had lost. Luna, for her part, struggled to find her footing. She resumed her work at Forrester Creations, but the murmurs followed her, the weight of her identity a continuous burden. She longed to know her father, to understand the man whose blood flowed through her veins, but every step toward him felt like a betrayal to Katie and Will. She began to withdraw, her once bright spirit fading beneath the strain of her new reality. Will, meantime, struggled with his rage. He saw the grief in his mother's eyes and the pressure in his father's voice, and he felt powerless to change it. He began missing courses and spending his nights at bars, attempting to block out the noise in his head. He met Luna at a coffee shop one night, looking for refuge in the obscurity of a packed room. They sat in quiet for a long time, the weight of their shared blood forming a tenuous bridge between them. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Luna finally replied, her voice barely heard above the din of the cafe. "I just wanted to know who I was." Will stared at her, his fury subsiding for the first time. "I know," he replied, "but you being here, it's changed everything." He stopped, then added, "I don't know how to be your brother." Luna's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I don't know how to be your sister either." The rain continued to fall outside, a constant reminder of the storm that had passed through their lives. The DNA resulted in a spark, which ignited a fire that destroyed everything in its path. Bill, Katie, Will, and Luna were left to pick up the pieces, each dealing with their own pain, shame, and longing for a family that may never be complete again. The truth had set them free, but as they discovered, freedom came at a terrible cost. When Bridget went into the room with the envelope in her hands, the atmosphere changed. It was heavy like a hurricane weighing down on a house, forcing everyone inside to hold their breath. Bill Spencer had always believed he could control outcomes, money, power, influence, and even fate if necessary. But in that moment, with Bridget's somber expression indicating she was about to read something irreversible, he recognized control was an illusion. Katie sat in the chair next him, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles paled. And Will, sweet Will, stood near the window, attempting to appear mature while revealing every bit of his dread in the tremble of his lip. Luna was also there. She had not intended to be a part of this scene. Her life was already wrapped in secrets and questions she hadn't asked for. But she had been drawn into Bill's world, Katie's pain, and Will's perplexity. The letter and the contents inside connected them all in ways no one could have anticipated. Bridget cleared her throat, and the silence became intolerable. Bill straightened, bracing himself for an uncomfortable truth he couldn't escape. Katie lowered her gaze, praying for something, but she wasn't sure which conclusion would hurt less. Will leaned his forehead against the cool glass, trying to hide his emotions. Luna, frail yet composed, folded her hands together, her eyes glistening with expectation. Bridget reviewed the results. The phrases appeared simple. Medical facts, DNA percentages, and linkages stated on paper. But the reality they held was awful. Will was not who Bill believed he was. The son he had constructed dreams around, the boy he had promised the world to. The only reason Katie and he had ever attempted to be civil. Suddenly there was a break in that foundation so deep that no amount of money or apologies could fix it. Katie gasped and covered her lips. Her heart broke twice in that moment. Once for the child she had nurtured and again for the guy she had once loved. Bill's expression tightened, but his eyes betrayed him. Despite his swagger and reputation for ruthlessness, those eyes were filled with quiet sadness. He wasn't losing business shares or contracts, he was losing a piece of himself. Luna felt the room collapse around her, because the results affected her as well. The web of falsehoods and histories connected her fate to Bill's, Katie's, and Will's. She had entered their lives as an outsider, unsure of her place and bearing her own family secrets. And now she knew she was a contributing factor to the revelation of this reality. The hours following the disclosure blurred together. No one understood how to communicate, console, or even stand in the same room without their weight crushing them. Bill fled first, coming out of the home with shoulders sunk, the first time Will had ever seen his father appear little. Katie attempted to hold Will, but he jerked away, puzzled and upset. "Why haven't you told me?" he wailed, and Katie had no answer that could help him. She had done her best, she reflected, but doing so now seemed like failure. Will had always believed in the fairy tale that, no matter how shattered his parents were, he was the link that held them together. He had hoped that his father's empire, his mother's affection, and his own innocence could result in anything enduring. But the results dashed that dream. He was not the anchor. He was a question mark. That knowledge wounded worse than anything. Will sat on the floor, embracing his knees alone in his room. He remembered his father taking him to the office and showing him the huge buildings that he would one day own. Bill had spoken about legacy, power, and being a Spencer man. Will had believed every word. Now he wondered if he had the right to call himself a Spencer. The name felt stolen, taken from a guy who may no longer regard him as his own. Katie watched from the doorway, her heart bleeding for him. She wanted to tell him it didn't matter. Love was stronger than blood and Bill would always care. Katie, however, knew Bill, and she understood how proud he was, and how betrayal affected him worse than most. She feared Will would pay the price for truths over which he had no control. Bill, however, stood alone in his office, gazing at the city lights that had once made him feel invincible. For years he had viewed the skyline as a reflection of himself. Dazzling, untouchable, and powerful. But tonight, everything seemed hollow. He remembered Will's chuckle, the way the youngster gazed up at him with unwavering faith. Was that trust also a lie? Was every recollection stained by the shadow of doubt? Bill's heart ached in ways he didn't understand. He had already lost deals, ladies, and friends. However, losing Will's assurance was an other kind of wound. And then there was Luna. She strolled through the hallways of the Spencer house like a ghost. She felt terrible, despite the fact that she had not falsified the results or told the lies that led to this situation. Her name was muttered in the storm, but she was already woven into the story. She reflected on her own family and how secrets had warped her life, and she recognized the same pattern here. People believe that truth provides serenity, but sometimes it just shatters. The next day, Katie attempted to contact Bill. She wanted to remind him that no matter what the DNA said, Will still needed him. But Bill couldn't confront her yet. He was too angry, angry at fate, angry at himself, angry at the universe for making him believe in something that could be erased with a few words on paper. He wondered whether Katie had known all along and had kept it from him out of fear. The thought made his stomach turn. Will, seeking answers, looked to Luna. She was the only one who didn't treat him like he was broken. She listened calmly as he posed the questions no one else could. If I'm not his son, who am I? Why was I born if all I believed was false? Luna, with tears in her eyes, told him what she wished someone had told her. Identity isn't founded just on biology, and love defines family more than blood. Even as she whispered the words, she could tell they were frail in the face of the tempest in his heart. The nights turned into weeks, and the house was never the same. Bill visited less frequently, unable to look Will in the eyes without sensing betrayal. Katie fought to keep the family together, but her own spirit was cracking. Will became quieter, older, as if childhood had been snatched from him in the single moment Bridget read the package. Bill occasionally found himself reaching for his phone, wanting to contact Will, hear his voice and tell him that nothing had changed. But pride always stopped him. Pride, anguish and the unsettling fear that everything had changed. Katie, overwhelmed from bearing both her son's grief and Bill's quiet, sobbed alone in her room. She'd fought so many battles in her life, but this one seemed unwinnable. And Luna, she became the mute witness to everything. She witnessed a boy's innocence shattered, a mother's strength weakened, and a father's dignity crumble. She wanted to repair it, to put them back together, but she knew some wounds never heal. She realized that truth can shatter families even when they love strongly. One evening Will placed a message on his desk. Katie discovered it while searching his vacant room in terror. The note wasn't long. It simply stated, "If I don't belong here, I'll find where I do." Her hands trembled as she read it, her pulse racing with fear. She contacted Bill, her voice breaking, and for the first time in weeks, he sensed fear in her tone. They searched together, trying not to lose him totally. When they discovered Will sitting on the pier, staring into the dark water, Bill's heart sank all over again. He saw his son, the boy he had reared regardless of blood, so little against the huge darkness. He moved forward, grabbing Will in his arms, and pride faded away. DNA no longer mattered. All that mattered was the boy's shaking body and the soft words he whispered. "Don't leave me, Dad." Bill clutched him closer than ever before. He didn't have answers or a strategy, but he did have love. For the first time since the results, he realized it could be enough. Katie watched them, tears running down her cheeks, knowing that, just maybe, the truth hadn't ruined them altogether. However, the scars would stay. Will would bear the wounds of that realization for the rest of his life. Katie would shoulder the guilt. Bill would be ashamed of ever doubting his son. And Luna would remember seeing a family fall apart and attempting to help them together. In the end, DNA had revealed facts. But love, wounded and battered as it was, informed them something else. Family isn't written on paper. It is written in the heart. And while the story was tragic and the sorrow was real, there was a glimmer of optimism that they might still be able to find their way back together.